So what's the reason people and I've heard it in the nerd circles too. What's with the Nolan slander? Like, why do people why is there just this rich disdain for Nolan in general?
So I think
he's like he don't have no good ideas. Like I think sometimes he overcommits under executes for certain things. But I want to be fair to some of the criticism. I think sometimes the stuff, but people be talking about him like he's a moron. Like he doesn't have like a brilliant idea in his head, and he's really trying to grapple with something, and then really trying to put on the screen something that you ain't never seen before. Trying to really do like really difficult, hard stuff. If that makes sense. Like even the way it is how the Bat motorcycle came out of the Batmobile and did that wall flip. You ain't never seen nothing like that in your life.
Never.
That was not live action. It's madness.
No. It was perfectly done.
Always trying to do stuff like that.
It's perfectly done. I mean, like literally the Bat. So I got a problem with Batman. I just don't like Christian Bale Batman. I think there's a good bit of people that also agree with that. Like they don't like Christian Bale's nasally mucus man Batman. But as far as like the slander, I think that his past
Nolan in particular.
They were saying like the slander, especially the last 3 movies that he's done, kind of is warranted. Like not trying to be mean, but Tenet was. I get it.
See, that way it was overcommitted to me. Like I said, overcommitted under the lip.
Yeah,
but at the same time.
It was
I feel like what was in his brain didn't make it to the screen. Does that make sense? I felt like I felt like it's just really hard to do that. Whatever it was he was trying to pull off.
Yeah.
I felt like he was onto something.
Yeah, like so he the concept of the inversions and stuff like that is very dope. The problem is that, and this is gonna sound strange, but the story was weak. You know, there was really no main character. Even though the main character was named protagonist.
That's not strange at all. I really do. I agree with you that the story wasn't strong. The story was.
But it doesn't warrant slander. It doesn't warrant slander. Like I would say, it does not warrant slander at all. So.
Because I can't do that. I wouldn't have been able to pull off anything.
Absolutely. I mean, Christopher Nolan has one of the most brilliant minds of screenwriting we've seen. You know, period. Like just be real. I mean, like Martin Scorsese is my favorite. Scorsese just sees things differently, and he don't mind making you feel a certain way while you're watching this movie. I appreciate that about Scorsese's films. Nolan sometimes gets lost in the sauce, like Interstellar, for example. You know, Interstellar was dope. Now let's not. I'm gonna start with that. It was dope. And there were lots of plot points in there that really would have worked. But at the very end, I think the hook was to hook you in more emotionally than it was to give you a full resolution of what they were trying to find. And Inception kind of gave you the ending that you needed, you know, I'm not going to spoil for people that ain't seen it, but, you know, because Nolan movies, you know, they're easy to spoil. That's another problem I got. Like at least they're easy to spoil because once you figure out the end, or at least you figure out a part of the end, the rest of the movie is like whatever. Outside the Batman movies, no offense, are already predictable. You know it's supposed to happen, but just his original Nolan films, for the most part, if you know the ending or even a piece of the end, it just ruins the entire experience. Dunkirk was another one that I watched and I was like, I think just got finished doing it. It was the one about the guy that had to run a message to his to his brother's squad, and what is it? It's 1914. Was it 19?
Was it 1917?
1917, bro. Oh goodness, that's a movie you gotta measure up to. That movie is great. So I watched Dunkirk and I watched 1917. And I was like, this is a mistake. I should have never watched Dunkirk because 1917 was so good. I think it's because 1917 is just like literally a diamond in the rough in war movies. And Nolan's just felt convoluted, you know. And that's no shade. but it's one of those things that Nolan has a problem with when it comes to that. Sometimes he gets lost in the sauce. He will throw you this immaculate idea, but then he just gets lost in the sauce when he's doing it on his own. Batman is an idea that we've had since 1939, 1940s. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard to corrupt something. People still do it, but it's pretty hard to deviate from what you already know. So he still had like a good basis on what Batman is. Inception, Tenet, name them. Like what's the name of the other one that we grew up watching? I didn't even know it's Nolan. Memento. I think he did Memento. That was Nolan? I think that was Nolan. Give me a second. I think he did Memento. Memento was nuts.
Yeah, like Inception did not age well. I watched Inception at the end of 2020. It was either at the end of 2020 or in January this year. That did not age well. Inception was
Memento didn't either, and I think that's a problem though, Drew. It's that because people are starting to point out, people are revering and hailing Nolan as the greatest screenplay writer. I'm like, no, there goes Scorsese. I mean, no offense to nobody else, Scorsese is a tough man to beat in that category. It's just, you got to come on with it. Scorsese didn't inspire 3-4 generations of doggone screenwriters. I'm like, that's like no shade towards Nolan, but he's not. Yeah, I think some people they ride too hard. They ride too hard for him, and then that's when the slander really gets amped up because you get folk online, especially with Tenet. I mean, if you go and read any Tenet videos on YouTube or whatever, and you look at the comments, you'll get a guy that's actually cordially saying, this movie doesn't make any sense. And then there'll be a guy that's a Nolan fan, be like, you're trash. You don't understand because you trash, and you ain't smart enough. It's the Rick and Morty situation. Have you ever heard the Rick and Morty conundrum that they have with the show and the fans of the show? Have you heard of this, Jordan?
So I haven't heard the conundrum, but I mean, okay. the only Rick and Morty fan that I know is Joel. Like Rick and Morty was not. I felt like I would have liked Rick and Morty more if it had come on Adult Swim back when I was watching Adult Swim. Like if Rick and Morty had come out like 2003, 2004, 2002. Early college years, late high school type stuff like that. I feel like if Rick and Morty had come out then, I would have appreciated Rick and Morty just as an Adult Swim product. But by the time I got to Winthrop, I wasn't watching Adult Swim anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I wasn't around no cable anymore. I was watching anime online, kind of thing like that. So I was like,
I think that was all of us, bro.
So Rick and Morty wasn't for me. So Joel latched on to Rick and Morty when I was in school. You know what I'm saying? Like he latched, and so he really likes Rick and Morty a lot. And I'm like, Rick and Morty is not like, I don't have no flavor for it. It's just not for me. Kind of thing like that. And I don't want to get in an argument with anybody about Rick and Morty because it was just like, look, I can't call it. It's just not for me. That's all.
I understand. So Rick and Morty is literally an ode to nihilism. The entire show, like it's a nihilistic based show where the main character is battling depression and being the smartest person in the entire universe and being around people who are not, and how difficult that is for him to be so smart and to be so gifted but yet feel so limited. That's a very major part to the show. And everything revolves around that conflict with him and his grandson, who to him he believes is being raised by an inferior person, like his father, who's like really content with life. He's content with making sure his family and stuff is taken care of. Rick ain't about that life. Rick wants people to explore and to go out and do things. I can understand that. I can understand that particular desire. And what ends up happening is that he takes his grandson out. His grandson begins to rub off on him, but he mostly begins to rub off on his grandson. His grandson's intelligence begins to skyrocket, and he begins to ask the same questions his granddaddy is getting. And that's really the premise of the show, where it's almost like Rick is passing his nihilism on to Morty because of the burden of the wise. In the midst of a crowd of people who like what we like to say, the terminology is people who are woke, or people who are asleep and people who are woke. Rick is the ultimate woke character. Just being real about the situation. Like if you want to write a woke character more woke than Rick, you won't. This dude has been written as like literally the most intelligent person in multiple dimensions and galaxies and universes. The dude is like crazy smart. And he has to deal with the burden of not being able to have conversations with people that understand him, not knowing how to do his humor, you know, and he just drinks, you know. So it's a nihilistic story. But the problem is that like people who don't like that, because they're like, I'm not a fan of nihilism. I'm not either. I'm not a fan of nihilistic, you know, because I'm like, I think I deal with that enough on my own. I deal with that enough on my own. I don't particularly need a show to tell me about nihilism when I understand it. So to me, it doesn't really appeal to me. But there's an epidemic of thought with the people who watch Rick and Morty that really do believe that they're more intelligent than the people who say that they don't like it. So that's where the major issues come in at, is when people say, well, because you're not a Rick and Morty fan, you're not intelligent. They're saying, well, you're not intelligent at all. You don't have any form of intelligence, actually, because you refuse to learn anything. And I'm smarter than you because of this. That's where the tension comes in. I think that Nolan fans are kind of in that same vein, where they feel that they're more intelligent than the people who are watching the movies and say that they don't like it, that they don't understand the movie. I think that's where the tension comes in at, where people are just like, you know, just throw this whole movie away, versus them having to fight with other people online about, you know, well, you're just dumb, you're stupid because you don't understand the movie, you know, that type of stuff. So I think that's where it's coming from, bro. But I've seen lots of Nolan slander, lots of it.
It's really interesting. I've even heard some of your guests do on the podcast, get some Nolan slander on. I was like, so I'm sitting in because like sometimes I'm usually in the car when I'm listening to your podcast. So I'm like, why are they going in on Nolan like that? What's the big deal? Like, I mean, I feel like what Nolan really wants to do when he grows up is to make. No, I don't mean that, like, you know, I'm not trying to demean him. You know what I want to do when I grow up. I feel like what Nolan really wants to do when he grows up is that he wants to make documentaries about space and then sit down and interview somebody about all the possibilities of space-time travel, the space-time fabrics and quantum mechanics. I feel like that's what he really wants to do, but he wants to somehow design it in a way that's going to be entertaining for people. I feel like that's what he really wants to do, because that's all he ever tries to do when he does these stories. But he tries to make the story compelling when he does these things, when he goes into these cerebral things. But what ends up happening is that he spends so much time trying to photograph the unphotographable, because you can't photograph any of this space stuff because we don't, as far as we know, so much of it's theory. The rest of it, we don't really know if it exists or not. But it seems to make sense when you look at the math and everything. So he's trying to photograph something that is really just existing in his imagination. It exists in his imagination and in the science books. That's sort of what's happening. And I think he wants to photograph it so badly. And he's trying to take characters. He's trying to create characters and put them in a world that gives him an excuse to photograph it. But it's really not about the characters at all. I feel like that's his weakness when it comes to writing and stuff like that. It ends up not being about the characters at all. It ends up being about the concept.
Yes.
But then he'll get a big name actor to be in there, and the trailers always look dope. And then he goes over I think almost every single one of his films, except for Tenet and a couple of others, Hans Zimmer did the soundtrack for it. So he and Hans have been rocking together for a long time. Yes. And so Hans is going to make you believe in terms of that kind of thing. So I feel like he's in love with the concept, he's in love with the science, and he really wants to take a photograph of something we haven't seen yet, and that's why he makes films. I do know that the people who believe in him, not the haughty people who insult other people's intelligence type fans, but like the people who rock with him and have been rocking with him, they believe in his product. Hans Zimmer's masterclass, he spends time talking about why he likes working with Nolan, and why his films are so fun to score, and that for him at least, he feels like Nolan's films are memorable, and they give him an opportunity to try to put texture on something that no one's ever seen before. It's like a challenge for him to, that kind of thing. So to me, I think there's something to it. I think that he overpromises he tries to over execute on a concept, and he can just kind of under delivers on the story part.
Yeah.
A lot of times on the humanity, because his stuff is not human, and I feel like when the stuff becomes when the most human elements happen in his stories, it's almost by accident.
Yes.
It's like it's almost by accident.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't think he counted on Heath Ledger doing what he did in The Dark Knight, because he almost makes the other two movies not exist. Like Heath Ledger shines so brightly.
He made the other two movies not exist.
He did. He shined so brightly. Like you almost never want to go back and even entertain watching the other two movies ever again. And I don't think that would have happened if Heath Ledger had, like, I feel like Heath Ledger was so good, he threw the whole trilogy off balance with how good it was. And then it became that thing you couldn't get back to.
Absolutely.